You're at a gas station on a Tuesday morning, and a classic Corvette pulls in. Not a new one, an old one. A C2 Stingray maybe, or a late C3, the kind with the hidden headlights and the long hood and the exhaust note that arrives before the car does. Everything stops. The guy filling his minivan stops. The teenager on her phone stops. The attendant through the glass stops. Nobody organized this. Nobody decided to pay attention. It just happened, the way it always happens, because there is no car built in the last 70 years that commands a parking lot the way a classic Corvette does, without trying. And the person behind the wheel knows this. They've always known it. What's interesting is that knowing it, and choosing the car anyway, says something far more specific about who they are than most people standing in that gas station will ever think to ask. Here's what people get wrong immediately. The classic Corvette driver gets read as ego, as someone who needs the room to stop, who planned the entrance, who is running some kind of performance for the people watching. This is almost always the wrong read. The psychology research on object attachment and personal identity consistently finds that the people most likely to use a possession as a performance tool are the ones who acquired it recently, for reasons connected to how it would be received. The people who have owned a classic Corvette for 20 years, who drove it through weather they probably shouldn't have, who spent entire weekends underneath it in a garage that wasn't quite warm enough. Those people have long since stopped thinking about the room stopping. The room stopping is background noise to them. What they're thinking about is the throttle response, and whether the carb is running rich, and the particular sound the exhaust makes when the revs climb past 4,000. The attention is a side effect they've made peace with. It was never the point. To understand why someone ends up in a relationship with this specific car, you have to go back further than the purchase. Psychologist Daniel Kahneman at Princeton spent decades studying how emotional memories are formed and retained, specifically, why certain experiences get encoded with an intensity that ordinary events don't. His research found that peak emotional moments, particularly those experienced during adolescent development, create memory traces that function almost as permanent reference points for the self, standards against which subsequent experiences get measured without the person consciously deciding to measure them. For an enormous proportion of classic Corvette owners, the car entered their awareness during exactly that window, not as something they owned, but as something they saw. A neighbor's driveway, a poster on a bedroom wall, a specific scene from a specific film at a specific age, when the brain was most receptive to imprinting. The car became lodged somewhere permanent before they ever sat in one, and the want that followed them through the intervening decades wasn't nostalgia in the sentimental sense. It was an unfinished psychological task, something the brain had categorized as important before they were old enough to act on it. This is different from simply liking a car. It's an aspirational anchor, an early image tied to a future version of the self that hasn't been reached yet. The Corvette doesn't just appeal to these people when they finally buy one. It completes something, and the specific quality of satisfaction that follows, the particular feeling of the first drive home, tends to be described by owners in language that sounds less like consumer satisfaction and more like resolution. There's a man named Vincent, 53 years old, from outside Sacramento. He grew up watching his uncle's 1967 Stingray sit under a tarp in a garage that was never quite organized enough for anyone to actually work on it. He wasn't allowed near it as a child. He'd look at it through the gap in the tarp when nobody was watching. When his uncle died, the car went to a cousin who sold it without telling anyone, and Vincent found out the way you find out about things like that, too late, from someone who didn't understand why it mattered. He spent 11 years looking for a 1967, not casually, not as a hobby, the way some people browse property listings in places they'll never move. Actively, specifically, with the kind of focused patience that tends to make the people around someone slightly concerned. He found one in 2019, barn-stored in Oregon, numbers matching, mechanically frozen, but structurally honest. He didn't cry when he bought it. He says he felt something closer to recognition, the same word Renata used about her Mustang, which suggests it's describing a real psychological phenomenon rather than a convenient metaphor. The first time he drove it after the restoration, 14 months of work, more money than he originally planned. 2 friendships deepened and 1 contractor relationship ended badly. He described feeling like a person who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time and had finally been allowed to put it down. What happened in those 14 months matters as much as the outcome. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, at the University of Chicago, in his research on mastery and optimal experience, identified a specific pattern in people who develop deep relationships with complex mechanical systems. The learning curve, which initially feels like obstacle, gradually becomes the relationship itself. The car stops being the goal and starts being the teacher. By the time Vincent drove the Stingray for the first time under its own power, he could read its behavior the way a musician reads a room. The slight hesitation off idle that meant the accelerator pump needed adjustment. The way the steering wheel communicated road texture through his palms before his eyes had processed what his hands already knew. Csikszentmihalyi called this stage embodied expertise, knowledge that has moved out of the conscious mind and into the body. And his research found that reaching it with a complex system produces one of the most durable forms of human satisfaction available. It doesn't fade the way novelty fades, it deepens with use. This is also why the classic Corvette community is structured the way it is. Not around brand loyalty exactly, though that's part of it, around mutual recognition of what it costs to know something this well. The conversations at a Corvette meet between 2 people who have never met before, reach a level of technical specificity within 4 minutes that would take months to reach in any other social context, because the shared object is a shared language, and speaking it fluently signals immediately that you've paid the same kind of dues. Albert Bandura at Stanford documented this pattern across expert communities in his research on social learning and self-efficacy. The way shared expertise creates bonds that are faster to form and more durable than bonds built on any other foundation, because they're grounded in demonstrated competence rather than performed connection. Quick question. Think about the last time you explained something about your car to someone who didn't drive one. A repair you made, a problem you diagnosed, a modification you understood, and felt the specific frustration of watching their eyes glaze over. That frustration is the gap between 2 different relationships with mechanical reality. Most people live on one side of it. Classic Corvette drivers live permanently on the other, and the community they've built exists partly as a solution to the social problem that gap creates. Now something honest needs to be said, because this car in particular attracts a specific dark side profile that the psychology of object attachment predicts almost exactly. Psychologists studying what's called status maintenance behavior, the use of a possession to project a social position that isn't internally felt or externally earned, have found that certain categories of high-visibility objects attract a disproportionate number of people buying the image rather than the experience. The classic Corvette is one of those objects. It has the visual presence, the cultural recognition, and the historical cachet to function as a shortcut to a particular kind of social standing, without requiring any of the knowledge, history, or genuine relationship that the car rewards in its most serious owners. These are the cars that stay under covers in climate-controlled garages and emerge for shows, but not for drives. The cars with trailers, because the owner doesn't want miles on the odometer. The cars whose owners can tell you the current market value to within $500, but can't tell you what the distributor timing is set to. The car, in these cases, has become a financial instrument wearing a fiberglass body. The badge says passion. The reality says portfolio. This isn't a judgment about those people's worth as human beings. It's an accurate description of a psychological pattern that Sherry Turkle at MIT documented in her research on human-object relationships. The distinction between what she called a constitutive relationship with an object, where the object is genuinely integrated into a person's identity and self-concept, and a decorative one, where the object is deployed in service of an image the person wants others to hold. Both exist in the classic Corvette world, and the fastest way to tell them apart has nothing to do with the car's condition or value. It has to do with how the owner talks about what goes wrong with it. Someone in a constitutive relationship talks about mechanical problems the way a parent talks about a difficult child, with frustration that never tips into rejection, with a kind of proprietary intimacy that makes clear the problem is being taken personally. Someone in a decorative relationship talks about mechanical problems like customer service complaints, something the object is doing to them, rather than something they and the object are working through together. For the people in the constitutive group, and they are the majority, despite what the show circuit stereotype suggests, what the Corvette ultimately provides is something that Tim Kasser at Knox College's research on values and well-being found to be one of the most reliable predictors of genuine psychological satisfaction: a sustained, deepening relationship with something that requires real engagement to maintain. Kasser's research consistently found that intrinsic values, mastery, connection, genuine experience, produce durable well-being in a way that extrinsic values, status, appearance, social validation, structurally cannot, because extrinsic rewards require constant external renewal, while intrinsic ones compound internally over time. Every mile in a classic Corvette by someone who knows the car adds to something. Every mile by someone performing ownership subtracts. And there's a final layer to this that deserves its own space, because it's specific to this car in a way it isn't quite specific to any other. The Corvette is the only American sports car with an unbroken lineage stretching back to 1953. Every other attempt at an American sports car either failed, was discontinued, or transformed into something categorically different. The Corvette survived every decade, every fuel crisis, every shift in the market, every corporate budget conversation that should have ended it but didn't, not because the market demanded it, but because the people who cared about it with an intensity that made killing it politically impossible inside the company that built it. The car exists today because of accumulated human insistence across 7 decades, and when someone drives a classic version of it, they're not just driving a machine, they're driving the physical record of that insistence, the proof that something built with genuine intention can outlast every trend that surrounded it. The people who feel that, who understand what they're sitting in when they sit in it, tend to carry themselves with a particular kind of quiet, not the quiet of someone who has nothing to say, the quiet of someone who has already said the thing that mattered by walking out to the garage and starting the engine. The world keeps producing new cars with more features and higher price tags and shorter relevance windows. And these people keep driving the thing they chose, or found, or restored, or inherited. The thing that was here before most of the noise started, and will be here after most of it stops. That's not a midlife crisis. That's not ego. That's someone who found the real thing early, or late, or after a long search, and had the sense to hold on to it. The question isn't why they drive it. The question is what it says about everyone else that they have to explain it at all. If this made something click, subscribe. More videos like this every week. And drop a comment below. What year is yours? And what did it take to get it? Tell us the whole story. We actually want to hear it.